This is the Lexus UX300E, which is the Japanese luxury car maker's first full electric vehicle. Or is it? With 150 kilowatts of power and 360 kilometers of range, it's not the most advanced and powerful EV out there, and it's not the most conspicuous either. But there's quite a bit to like here, and in this video we're going to take a good look at its design, features, how it drives, and how it stacks up against other EVs, and of course the more affordable UX variants, including the hybrid. So, is the UX300E a serious effort to compete against other luxury electric crossovers, or is it just a half-assed attempt by Lexus to enter the EV world? I remember when Lexus first brought out the UX, I sat in it and I remember thinking, this is so quiet and sort of modern that it really lended itself to being an EV. Fast forward 3 years and they've done just that with this UX300E, which, as I said before, really does not look any different to the normal petrol and hybrid UX versions. They've even got the big spindle grille, like a lot of EV versions of existing SUVs or cars, you know, they do more with a type of blank grille, but I think if they did it with this, it would look bloody terrible. So that said, there's really nothing behind it because it doesn't need to be there, but you know, it is as you see with Lexus, and it's a sort of part of its design language, which I think people didn't like at first, but we're really getting used to it. So I think Lexus would have been mad to do anything different with it. It's got the little blue highlight around the badge to show it's an EV, but so does the hybrid. But to the keen eye, there are a couple of ways you can tell this is the UX300E. Mostly down the back here, including the electric badge just in front of the rear wheel. And you'll notice it's got two filler caps on each side for the charging. This one's for AC charging, and on the passenger side, you plug in for DC charging. But as you can see, this is just very much a Lexus UX with that familiar SUV coupe style shape, the rising window line, that squat stance, and the rugged plastic wheel arches. Before the arrival of the UX300E, the priciest UX variant was the all-wheel drive hybrid UX250H Sports Luxury with a starting price of $64,100. Going fully electric will see you pay $74,000 for the UX300E Luxury and $81,000 for the Sports Luxury. Standard exterior features include LED lighting including DRLs and fog lamps, headlight washers and acoustic windscreen glass, with the Sports Luxury spec adding tri-beam LED headlights and LED front indicators. Coming around the back, and it stands out with a power tailgate with kick sensor and full LED lighting. Inside, there's also virtually to distinguish against the other UX variants. It's a nice, comfortable car. I quite like the way the seats almost recline and have a nice laid-back low feel like a Lexus sports sedan. In the luxury spec, you do get sort of vegan leather and really nice-looking trim, but this Sports Luxury sort of brings that a step up with proper cow leather, nice stitching along the dashboard, and this sort of stitching here, which is inspired by Kung Fu uniforms apparently. Each front seat has heating and ventilation, and the steering wheel is heated as well. Other things to look at here is the center console, which sort of envelopes you really in the cockpit, and you do sort of really feel cocooned in here in a nice way. It's got the usual standard sort of nice big bin there to put stuff in, a couple cup holders, a wireless phone charger on which to put your phone. So if you want to plug in your phone to use Apple CarPlay, that's all done with a couple USBs in here. There are door bins, you know, for your water bottle and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, it's a Lexus, and it wouldn't be a Lexus review if we didn't have a dig at the infotainment system a bit. It's got a nice big 10.3-inch touch screen. I was going to say touch screen, but it's not a touch screen. Unfortunately, you've got to use this trackpad here, which can be really fiddly, especially on the move. And using Apple CarPlay to go from sort of one function and get into the menu and, you know, go into something like Spotify, it's an absolute nightmare, really. But other than that, it has plenty of good features, and it does work pretty well. It comes also with a 13-speaker Mark Leveson stereo, which is really good. And while this is a really quiet car to drive, just being able to crank that up without having any wind or engine noise to really get in your way really makes it a nice sound system. The gauge cluster also seems basic compared to a lot of other EVs. You know, EVs sort of, it's nice having all different displays to show you an EV. Apart from that sort of Charge Eco power gauge, there's nothing much there. And there's a couple displays on the multifunction display which show things like your charging level, and you can do things like set when you charge. So you might just want to charge off peak and it'll come on a timer when you're plugged in at home and that sort of thing. But other than that, again, there's really not much here that's showing you that you're in an EV. One thing the Sports Luxury does add on top of all that though is a head-up display, which shows sort of navigation and driving things, and also a 360-degree parking camera, which is pretty much the only major difference. You also get a sunroof, but having driven both the Sport Luxury and then jumping into the Luxury as well, I can't say I really missed the features between the two. The EV powertrain differs by having a big battery under the floor pan, which seems to make the floor a little bit higher, which means you can't really get your feet under the front seats. And what that means is legroom just feels a bit tight. There's not too much knee room here. Headroom's also limited because you've got, you know, that sort of sloping roofline being a coupe SUV. But otherwise you've got nice front and side vision, and the seats themselves are pretty comfortable. Lexus does do comfort well even in its smaller cars, which I quite like. Amenities for rear seat passengers include air vents, a couple of small USB-C ports, and seat heating for the outboard seats, and of course the fold down armrest with cup holders. Looking further back, the boot space is a handy 413 litres. That's just 6 litres less than the petrol variant and 45 litres more than the hybrid. Unlike the others, there is no space saver spare wheel, with the space below the floor used to store charging cables and a puncher repair kit. It's worth noting that as well as all this luxury, Lexus has introduced a few sweeteners for anyone considering a UX300e, including a free 7 kilowatt AC home charger with installation, 3 years of complimentary rapid DC charging through the ChargeFox network, and 3 years of complimentary membership of the Lexus Encore Platinum Owner Benefits Program. The UX300e is also the first Lexus model to come with a longer 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, though this will apply to the rest of the Lexus range from January 2022 and will encompass all vehicles purchased in 2021. Before we go for a drive, let's talk electrons. Each UX300e comes with a 54.3 kilowatt-hour battery, which gives a driving range of 360 kilometres. It's not the most powerful battery out there, but the upside of that is a pretty quick 6.5-hour charging time with a 7 kilowatt home charger. Using a 50 kilowatt DC rapid charger will do the job in about 80 minutes. The UX300e is equipped with 2 charging ports towards the rear, a Type 2 socket for AC charging on the driver's side, and a CHAdeMO or DC charging port on the passenger side. CHAdeMO ports are still the preferred option in Japan, but are becoming less common in Australia. However, there are still plenty of compatible chargers around Australia, including at most ChargeFox stations. The UX300e is powered by a 150 kilowatt 300 Newton metre motor, which drives the front wheels through a 2-stage reduction gear. Like most front wheel EVs, it doesn't offer the kind of breakneck acceleration we see in more powerful BEVs, which isn't a bad thing as that would result in a lot of front wheel spin. But it manages to provide enough shove to send the UX300e from 0 to 100 kilometres an hour in a claimed 7.5 seconds, which is more than a second quicker than the Mercedes-Benz EQA 250. Each version has our Eco, Sport and Normal modes, and if you flick it to Sport, you do feel a bit more of a power boost when you put the foot down. It also stiffens the steering for a bit more accurate handling around bends. It rides on a relatively rudimentary suspension setup with McPherson fronts and rear wishbones, but the ride is pretty good. This is quite a rough road here, and you know, you can definitely feel the road imperfections, but it really absorbs most jarring and everything really well. But yet, despite being quite softly sprung for rougher roads, it doesn't really impact handling at all. You'd think when putting a 400 kilo battery, you know, below a car like this, it would somehow have an effect on handling it, not in a good way. But the fact is the weight is quite well distributed, so you know, it really feels quite composed and well planted. Another thing the battery does is lower the car's centre of gravity from 594 millimetres in the hybrid to just 530 millimetres, which makes it feel a lot more like a sports sedan. The result is really good sharp handling, which is helped by having that sort of really good front end compliance, which the UX already had, but you've got really nice a lighter front end too, because the motor's about 100 kilograms less than the weight of the petrol engine, which mitigates the sort of extra weight of the batteries. The regen braking in the UX300E is a bit more subtle than in other EVs. You can control it with the paddle shifters, but it doesn't have that, it doesn't just want to stop as soon as you sort of take your foot off. So, but if you do want it to sort of embrace sort of one pedal driving with a lot more stopping power when you take your foot off the accelerator, you can just engage the sort of B setting in the gear shifter, which is also a feature in the Toyota and Lexus hybrids. And what that does is give you a bit more braking force. So, you're not having to actually use the actual brakes when you're coming around bends. The other advantage of an EV is you don't have that sort of complex gearbox. It's just a single speed reduction gear. That means then the car will just respond to your throttle inputs, whether you're speeding up or slowing down instantly. And that's really helpful for sort of obviously when you enter a bend, but then exiting as well. So that way, if you find yourself overcooking a bend, you're going to find it much easier to get yourself out of trouble pretty well just by getting your foot off the accelerator. The UX300E's luxury rides on 17-inch Michelin Primacy 3 rubber, and this sports luxury has slightly bigger 18-inch tyres, but I reckon the handling is a little sharper. Needless to say that, all these values we see when driving it to its extreme, really coming to their own in town, where it's just quiet, nimble, and just really relaxing to drive. You can probably almost notice too, I'm doing 100k out here in the countryside, and road noise is quite limited. The NVH levels in this car is really good, and of course there's no engine, but normally when I'm driving a car with an engine doing this sort of thing, I'd probably be yelling at the camera, but I'm not. This is just a normal conversational sort of level of voice, and it is a very quiet car, and it's quite a windy day too, so I'm quite impressed by that. The engine makes a nice sort of whirring noise when you get going. I'm not sure if they do manufacture that to give it some noise so pedestrians aren't caught short, or it's just the natural sound of the motor, but I don't mind the noise at all when it gets going. It sounds a bit futuristic. Other safety features include 8 airbags and advanced driver assist systems, including autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, parking support braking, all-speed adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, road sign assist, blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, and automatic high beam. All that is enough for the UX300E to share a 5-star ANCAP safety rating with its petrol and hybrid siblings. The UX300E is likely to be the only existing Lexus model to receive an EV version, with the next Lexus EV to come on a bespoke EV platform. One could argue that this is just a stopgap model by Lexus to join the EV party, alongside its luxury competitors, and there could be an element of truth to that. And while it lacks a more powerful battery and longer range of some of its rivals, this is a pretty solid effort by Lexus, which has, taken the UX, which is already a good, fun, sharp car, added an EV powertrain to it without at all ruining its dynamics, and if anything, it's arguably better. But whether people choose this over more advanced EVs in its price range, such as the Tesla Model 3 or Ioniq 5, remains to be seen. But its standard features and buyer incentives should play well to Lexus's loyal customer base, which finally has the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of quick, silent, emissions-free driving, along with the brand's ownership experience. And I reckon they won't be disappointed.